Good morning, everybody. Now, in the UK, the Labour government, which we've had since the beginning of July and has so far been pretty disastrous on everything, is about to get a lot worse because on the 30th of October, they are presenting their budget and what they're going to do financially in the UK. Up to now, all the noise that they've been making is that there is a £22 billion black hole. I don't know where they got that number from. They seem to have just pulled it out of thin air. But actually, we've got a black hole which is a whole lot bigger than that. Actually, a £2.5 trillion black hole, which is our national debt, which is increasing by £120 billion per year. That's the amount the government spends, more than it takes in tax revenue and borrowing. Well, it needs to borrow that £120 billion to make up the difference. Sorry, I was slightly wrong there, misspoke. That happens, but I correct myself. So they're spending more than they get in tax revenue. So what they are saying is that they need to increase taxes rather than reduce spending and reduce borrowing, which is the sensible thing to do so that we don't spend more than we take in. And the government is wasting huge amounts of money on spending on things that we don't need, like migrant hotels, foreign aid, war in Ukraine. Lammy has just promised another £3 billion a year to keep the war in Ukraine going, where they're taking away £1.5 billion from pensioners with the winter fuel allowance that they've had for decades now, which a lot of pensioners rely on to keep the heating on in a cold winter, even though they know and admit that doing that may lead to the deaths of 4,000 pensioners who could otherwise stay alive because they could afford to heat their homes. And this is the Labour Party that is supposed to care for pensioners, for the marginalised, for the poor, and they don't at all. They care for their mates who are getting money to keep the war going and obviously get payments from that £3 billion in terms of weapon sales and other things that are going on that are very nefarious. But the point is here that Rachel Reeves, who is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I can't believe that that's actually a sentence these days, is talking about all kinds of things which are completely odious to normal people and will trash the economy and make things worse and won't actually get any money for the Exchequer for the country, but are trying to grab little bits of money here and there and everywhere, and everything that she suggests is just going to make things worse. I mean, one of the things we're told about is the VAT being put on private school fees, which they say is going to get them a couple of billion quid, but it's not, because what will happen there is many parents will not be able to afford to send their children to those schools anymore with a 20% increase in fees. They'll take their children out of those schools and put them into state schools, and then the government will have to end up paying money for those children to get educated in state schools, if you can actually call that education. I mean, it's state indoctrination farms where they learn about transgenderism and all this kind of stuff these days, but that's another point. Now, just yesterday we hear another absolutely balmy idea that she's going to put up capital gains tax to something between 33 and 39%. At the moment, capital gains tax is 20%. On most things as 28% on property, not your first homes, but second homes and so on. But so the rates of capital gains tax could go up anywhere between 19% to sort of 5% to 19%, depending on the class of assets you're talking about. And even the HMRC, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, that collects tax, says this is not going to create any extra money for the country. In fact, you're going to have less money, because if you increase capital gains tax to a point where people don't want to pay taxation and they can move their money to another country, that's just what they're going to do. So people who invest in the country, who are able and willing to pay 20% capital gains tax on their investments, If you increase that from 20% up to nearly 40%, 39%, as she says, a lot of investors are just going to pull their money out of the UK and put it in Singapore or Dubai or Switzerland or the Virgin Islands or somewhere. Or even Ireland, or some other country that's got a lower rate of taxation than we do in the UK. That's just how things work. But the Labour government doesn't seem to understand this. Because one, they think that increasing tax increases revenue. It doesn't, because of the Laffer curve that shows, it does increase up to a point, but then it goes back down again. If you get to up to a point and you increase tax rates over a certain threshold, it's different for different countries, different places, depending on the nature of the people who are in the country. But if you go above a certain point, tax revenue decreases right back down to zero, because it makes sense. If you tax everyone at 100%, no one's going to do any work. No one's going to invest anything. You're not going to get zero revenue, same as you would. So taxing someone at 100% is effectively the same as not taxing someone at all in terms of revenue. There's a sweet spot where you get the maximum revenue, and you have to find what that is. And the rates that we have at the UK at the moment, I think, is a little bit above the sweet spot. They should be decreased a little bit, because that will encourage more people to invest, more people to become entrepreneurs, more people to work harder. And so there's more revenue, more economic activity. And even if you tax that at a lower rate, you get more revenue. I understand that. We understand that in the Heritage Party. But the Labour Party doesn't seem to get that at all. They think you've got to tax more, then you're going to get more money coming in. The other thing is that they seem to consider that people's money is their money. They don't consider that the money you earn is yours, and by taxing you, they're taking your money. What they consider is that we're letting you keep some of our money by not taxing you at 100%. That's how they think. They actually think that the money people earn, the money people gain, the money people make profit on in the economy belongs to the government. It belongs to the state. And they're so nice in letting us, have a little bit of that for ourselves, rather than what is actually the way it is that the money that you earn as an individual or a business is your money. And, it's not the government's. They tax you, and the social contract, which is not a contract, it's just a device, rhetorical device to say that we consent to the government doing certain things. We consent to the government taking a little bit, a small proportion of what we earn, so that they can spend it on public services that we all benefit from. Police service, which is supposed to keep you safe. Unfortunately, it's diverted from that. Education, which is supposed to educate our kids. Again, unfortunately, it's not really educating our kids anymore. And healthcare, which is supposed to look after us. Unfortunately, the National Health Service seems to be something that wants to kill people these days by injecting them with morphine and midazolam and implementing all of these non-resuscitation orders. So that's diverted from what it originally was supposed to be doing. So, we pay these taxes to get these things that supposedly benefit us. But, the question is, are these things benefiting us at all anymore? I mean, you've got to question this. In a normal functioning society, perhaps, you go back 50 or 60 years, these things did work wholly for the benefit of the people of the country, but now they don't. I mean, that's a whole other issue. But the thing is here, that's how the Labour government thinks, that our money is their money, and they can tax it as much as they want, and because it's their money, which is not true. So they have a very kleptocratic mindset, an erroneous mindset about what money actually is. So with this capital gains tax rise, what they've said here is, oh no, we're not going to increase it to 39%. But they haven't said anything about, well, what about 33%? They haven't said they're not going to do that. They haven't denied that at all. So they're seriously looking at this. And it's actually going to be counterproductive because they will get less revenue because people are going to leave the country who have, who need to pay capital gains tax, or, under the system that we've got, who invest, who have businesses with property and shares and so on. They start a company, get shares from the company. The shares go up if the company is successful. They sell some of the shares, and then they have to pay 20% on the profit of the sale of their shares. At the moment, if they have to pay 38, 39%, they're going to say, well, we're not going to make anything by investing in your nation anymore. So we're going to invest in another country rather than the UK. That's what's going to happen. And a lot of people are very, very worried about what the budget is going to bring, not just in terms of capital gains tax, but in terms of other taxes, VAT, corporation tax, national insurance. They said they're not going to put up income tax and national insurance, but who knows? Because when the day comes, the announcements will be made, and we know this is a government, a regime which says it's going to do one thing, and then it does exactly the opposite when they get into power, when they've got into power, when they make an announcement. So you just don't know what's going to happen, but it's not going to be good. It's going to be an absolute mess, because you've got this government that is ideologically committed to class war, to destroying property and to destroying business, it seems, with the taxation that they're going to put in place, and for no discernible benefit whatsoever. Now, the thing is, if you're worried about this, I don't give out financial advice, but sometimes people ask me, what can we do about this? What can we do? With the other thing that is in the pipeline is the legislation has been put in place for bank bail-ins. So if there's another financial crisis, as there was in 2008, and it's inevitable, because all of the nations in the West are just getting more and more and more into debt, and we're getting to the point where we can't get out of it. The government doesn't have enough money to bail out banks anymore. If there's a banking crash, a liquidity crisis, there will be bail-ins. And the legislation's been put in place there. The Banking Act 2009 in the UK and other countries have got similar legislation to say that, if there's a banking crash, the government can keep the deposits in the bank. So if you have, most people have got a bank account. I've got a bank account. I've got a certain amount of money in there. I don't keep too much in my bank anymore, because if there is a crisis, that money is gone, unless someone kindly gives me that money back, from the financial compensation scheme. And there isn't enough money in that to give up to £85,000 back to everybody who's got a bank account if all the banks go under at the same time. As I said, I don't give financial advice, but a lot of people are interested in gold and silver, precious metals, as a way to hedge against any kind of hyperinflation or banking crash or even capital gains, because some gold coins, not all of them, but some of them are free from capital gains tax and free from VAT as well. Now, I'm now working with a company. I'm not giving financial advice, but you can have a look in the link down below. Look at Gold Bullion Partners, and they have a guide to buy gold. So you can just click on there, have a look at the guide, talk to them if you like, and you can see what they say about gold as a potential hedge against the bad things that might happen in the budget, or if there is if there is a banking crash or a banking crisis. So that's up to you. You can have a look. So I'll just put a link down there below, and hopefully that helps some of you if you're thinking about these things. Anyway, so I hope that when the budget comes, it won't be as bad as it could be, and just by pushing back on everything, all these ideas that are coming out about increasing capital gains, increasing VAT on school fees, increasing this, increasing that, if we speak out and say, no, this is just going to be a disaster and it's actually going to be counterproductive, it will push them back, into not doing all of these dreadful things that are just going to destroy individuals and businesses. And what they will do instead is cut the wasteful spending. The foreign aid, the war in Ukraine, the migrant hotels, the diversity officers, the net zero, which is going to cost the country, between $1 trillion and $3 trillion by 2050. This is the different estimates that people give. Huge amounts of money every year just wasted, poured down the drain on climate alarmism and this ridiculous net zero policy and program that they've got. Those are the things that need to change and be stopped. So we stop wasting money on erroneous things which are no good for the country, and you just line the pockets of people who are scamming us rather than hurting ordinary working people and small and medium-sized businesses especially, many of whom will go under if tax rates increase, and investors who just won't bother investing in the country, whether they're domestic or international, if tax rates just go through the roof in some kind of ridiculous class war ideological action in the budget on the 30th of October. So let's speak out for financial responsibility and for actions and policies that will help the economy rather than destroy the economy. So thanks for listening, everybody, and let's hope for the best but prepare for the worst.